Seattle is a big, bustling, and crowded city. And as in every large North American city, the radio dial in Seattle is dense with the competing voices of synthetic balladeers, temporary jazz singers, weathermen, pitchmen, news announcers, and the pervasive sound of commercial radio everywhere, nervous, staccato, and filling a desperate need for distraction. In defense against what many people regard as pollution of the airwaves, has grown up an alternative, the use of the FM band as a vehicle for transmitting programs of music and talk of superior quality. Even the FM band in the large centers is becoming crowded as more and more people buy sets capable of receiving it and the market gets richer. But FM is still the last refuge of the egghead, the music lover, the nonconformist. In Seattle, there are at least 2 stations filling this need. KLSN, broadcasting classical music, commentary, and live folk music, and KRAB, K-R-A-B, as untidy and unlikely a radio station as was ever conceived by the inventor of the vacuum tube. We're about to investigate the theory and the practice of KRAB. KRAB is owned by a young man of 30 whose name is Lorenzo Milam. He believes that the right to broadcast is a privilege and a joy, and he's prepared, if necessary, to continue running his station at a loss, currently about $500 a month, as long as his money holds out to pay for that privilege. KRAB survives, in fact, through the devotion of its scores of volunteer workers.
What I want to do is give you some idea of what it means to announce on KRAB. Besides the fact that you don't get any money. You've got to talk to people conversationally, as if you were in their own living room, for instance. Because we're not selling anything to anybody. The station, if it's any good, is going to sell itself. But I don't even like to think of selling. We just want to talk to people as if we're right there. We're not projecting. We're not using any of the announcer techniques. The only time that you will have to do any selling, if I may use that term, is when you're doing our non-commercial spot announcements. And these are just little plugs, just little vignettes to give people some idea of what the station's all about, why we're here, why we need their support, why we have no commercials. And you'll say something like this. You'll say, KRAB is a non-commercial station because we like it that way. We feel this is the only way we're going to get the freedom to put on the type of programs that we must put on. Our commentaries, our discussions, our far-out musical programs are only possible because KRAB does not have any commercial sponsors, never will have any commercial sponsors. People who support our station send in checks for $12 a year. This entitles them to our eternal gratitude and to our program guide, which is ill-printed and sent out every 2 weeks. Something like that, you know.
Yep.
Just give them an idea of why we're here and what do we, how can we be so outrageous as to ask for money on the air? Pronunciation. You'll sometimes have problem with pronunciation. You can handle German.
Yes, I think I can.
And French?
German, French, a little Spanish.
Dutch?
Dutch fluent.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, great. We don't have any Dutch programs.
Too bad. I have to air some.
How about Russian?
A few words.
Really?
Yeah.
That's great.
But, not very familiar with.
Things like Chinese, Japanese.
No, I'm completely unfamiliar with that.
Well, so am I. So so what we got to train you to do in some ways is to fake these things, because all languages have certain rules that you use for pronunciation, and if you can learn to fake these, you've got it made.
We asked KRAB's chief engineer and poetry director, Jeremy Lansman, to give us a non-technical description of their transmitter.
You know, you have at the CBC a tremendous studio layout and a very official kind of organization. Behind some stations, there's just one man and one turntable, really small stations. Well, this is it. It starts down here, just a little bitty signal, and it dribbles up into this department here, where it becomes, instead of like a receiver signal, it becomes about 1,000 watts. It could light up 10 of your household light bulbs. And then it shoots out this big pipe here into the next stage, where it gets up to 5 kilowatts. And then it goes up to our tower, which is really a phone pole after all. It's a lot cheaper that way. and goes out. I imagine we have some listeners in Victoria. It's possible to get us in Vancouver, and I know that we've had some calls from Portland. Well, we get around a little bit. It pushes back the walls of the whole studio, really.
That's very important when you're introducing commentaries, that you never say anything about the commentator. We're not trying to hide this from people. People can listen to the commentaries and figure out what these people's political orientation is. Mm-hmm. But we just don't title people.
Yeah.
We don't want to put them in a pigeonhole because their words are going to speak for themselves. So it's fairly straightforward. You know, you just introduce all the programs at the beginning of the evening. Then between the programs themselves, you say, that was Films of the Week with Bob Connor. This is KRAB in Seattle. You have to say that.
That's all you have to say.
Yeah, you don't have to say, this is KRAB at 107.7, high in the clouds up on Roosevelt Way. You just have to give... This is another thing. It's the essence of simplicity. We're not even telling people where we are on the dial. If they're there at 107.7, they're listening to us, and we don't have to tell them where they are. We don't even know where we are sometimes.
Where KRAB is, of course, depends on the time of day. It has a second unofficial home among the houseboats of Lake Union, where Lorenzo Milam and other KRAB workers and supporters live. Lorenzo tends to keep fairly regular hours. That is, he's seldom seen before noon and seldom in bed before 3 in the morning. The impression is of a life as improvised as the station's programming. And why not?
Our problem has been, we've got 2 houseboats down here, and we've got a lot of people who drop in. So we try to find a place for them to stay because we enjoy being in the position where people can drop in on you. But also, you know, you want to help these guys out when they're in town. And there's a bit of complaint when people come in at 3 in the morning and there are 12 or 15 people running up and down the dock. And one of the guy who owns the dock down there at the end one time was complaining because several of the people that were staying with us ran up and down the stairs, and he said there were sounded to him like a bunch of elephants. So we thought we'd get an elephant sometime and bring him down here so we could really try it out.
Both in working up here in school, if you live in a houseboat, they say, oh, Sin Valley, you know, and here you are, you're making free love with one hand and you're out scooping garbage out of the lake with the other. And in between, you're having parties where the cops always come and, of course, you swim away to escape. And I couldn't believe this because I lived here for 6 months and I never saw a party. I never saw anybody under 50 years of age except Lorenzo.
But the secret of houseboat living is it is cheap, and it's really a fine life because you're right there in touch with the water and the storms, especially when they blow away your houseboat. You feel like you're one with nature, you know, and that's nice.
And this one too. This is from Mrs. Susanna Higstrom in Seattle. Dear Sirs, your programs have been a most enriching experience. Every day we find that something, and frequently most things presented, are of intense personal concern. We have enjoyed more than anything else hearing well-known individuals speak. David Reisman, superb. Giovanni Costigan, superb. Fred Schwartz and Lee Harvey Oswald, fascinating interviews. And John Goldmark, among others. The only really disappointing program was the discussion on abortion. We expected such great things, and it seemed that the discussion never left the point of the Catholic Church on the basic morality. Surely the discussion leader could have progressed to other facets of the issue. We realized that it was probably through no fault of your own that a Catholic obstetrician was the sole representative of the Catholic Church, as well as of the field of obstetrics. Is that right? Obstetrics? We never knew. It is, of course, only conjecture that his viewpoint was not really representative of all obstetricians.
Well, we were trying to examine the laws that exist and the whole concept of abortion, and see whether it's like so many of our programs. We really don't have a point in it. We just want to air the subject that's been so taboo for so long on the communications media, and so we got a minister from the Unitarian Church, and we got a Catholic doctor, and we got a lawyer, and I don't know, who's to say why these things don't ever take off? Some programs just, you know, they just go wild. The people that get in here get all excited. And there's something about it that just, you know, you get this give and take and the dissension and the fighting. The abortion program, it did have a lot of dissension on it, but admittedly the Catholic doctor was overwhelmed by the opposition.
And did you say you got a larger male reaction than usual on this, did you?
Oh, yeah. One lady wrote and accused us purposely of only having one Catholic on the program, just because she said that we were anti-Catholic. And it's so hard to convince people that we're trying to put all sorts of viewpoints on the air with no restraint.
KRAB's revenue comes entirely from its subscribers, and its subscribers are those who value the programs enough to send $12 every year. In return for this, they receive a typewritten program guide every other week, prefaced by an essay or editorial which has become almost as important in formulating the philosophy of KRAB as the programs themselves. These essays are a record of Lorenzo Milam's fight to keep his independence.
We know it's great. Even the breakdowns and the blowouts are great. And one of the prime displeasures of American civilization is that one must spoil the fun of being grand by putting one's grandness into words to convince people to buy. Well, what I was trying to do in that is give some people the idea of...
Now you're going to put it into words. That's why.
Let me tell you what I was trying to say. This, you know, people really have come up with some great public relations ideas, and one of the things we're reacting against is this whole public relations bit, because I think it's destructive. I think it's destructive to the individual, and it's destructive to the world. So we don't sell ourselves too much, and that's why we're losing money.
Okay, let's take up this question of losing money, and you use the phrase there, the ultimate destruction of the whole idea of KRAB. Realistically, how long do you think this can go on?
Well, I keep setting deadlines for myself. Of course, the thing that happened just a couple of days ago is that the Federal Communications Commission approved the transfer of KRAB from me as an individual to a non-profit corporation. And what this does is this opens the door to a great deal more potential contributions. But people call us up and they say, I happen to have a foundation in my family which is willing to give $15,000 so that KRAB can improve its facilities. That's how much they believe in it. And I have to say, I'm sorry, we can't accept the money because we're not a non-profit corporation yet. So, in one swoop, the FCC has made it possible for us to perhaps have a better chance of surviving.
But when does this transfer of ownership take place?
It took place 2 days ago. We applied for it 15 months ago. Typical of our problems with the FCC.
Usually it's, 3 months or so. It goes right through. But we have special kinds of letters of complaint that come in, you know, and say, there's communist stations there, you gotta get them off the air. And we've heard that there have been a couple of letters like that. And that doesn't help us at all. We're not pro-communist or anything of that sort.
It's so hard.
People can so easily identify, they hear a socialist on the air, and there they are. That station has to be pro-socialist or pro-communist, which is the same thing to a lot of people.
Supposing that the best happens, supposing that you really do get a grant of a sizable amount of money to help put you on a different footing.
$1 million from the Ford Foundation, let's say.
This is what you'd like.
Or 3 or 4 million.
That would be nice.
Aren't you afraid that the change that this would bring about to your operation here would also change you in some subtle way, or change the kind of operation or the kind of station you'd have?
Oh, not very much. You know what we would like to do? We would like to get 2 or 3 people who are paid, and then set up completely independent stations, in one, for example, maybe Portland, something like that. And then we would be very closely related program-wise, and we could do network kinds of things. And our commentators would be more interested in commentating because they would be heard instead by one audience of 1 million, they'd have a potential audience of 3 or 4 million. And as we added more stations, the potential audience would grow. And we would find it easier to get good programs, and each station would be independent in its own way. at the same time. Yet we would have a sort of off-the-air pickup so that everything could be networked.
Yeah. Well, the prospect of getting the money has frightened me a bit.
Now, we've talked an awful lot about what we would do with it, though.
Yeah.
Hours and hours.
Because it's just simple things that you can do. I mean, if we could put our transmitting apparatus higher on a hill outside the city, say.
We've had many discussions about Mount Rainier, which is 14,000 feet up. We cover Victoria and Vancouver like local stations.
This would give us so much greater potential as far as audience goes. It might increase the pressure on us too, admittedly.
I'm just thinking about the fact that if you were fairly well endowed and fairly obviously well endowed, would it not then be difficult for you to get some commentators free of charge? Wouldn't you then feel obliged to say, well, there's a standard rate now, and might have to keep on paying a standard rate to commentators? And
I
then
don't think so. The nature of commentators is that they want to be heard. Most of them are people who are dissatisfied in some way with the way the society is going. And I don't know, most of them are students or professional people, and they don't worry too much about money. And I see no potentiality of change in that. The only pay difference we would make is so we could pay us to air. And that would be so nice. And may have views, but they're really not for public consumption, because this is I mean, when you take a position of responsibility, and I guess that's what it is, running a station like this, one of my responsibilities is not to have any views myself. Carrie B. Hello. Well, okay, hold on a minute. Judy wants someone to come get her.
Hello.
Gosh.
I suppose.
So, okay, I mean, as I say, my business is not to take any views and not to express my views. And as soon as I went on the air to express my views, immediately I would alienate these conservative commentators that I think are so vital a part of our programming. Where else can you hear good and intellectual conservative commentators? There's really no place. Not in this city, anyway.
Well, I thought Lifeline was good sometimes.
Yeah, okay. Occasionally they're good. Consistently good conservative commentators, I think we have. And I'm not going to make trouble by doing this sort of thing, by expressing my own.
I'm not going to say that our commentators are consistently good, though. All of them, just the conservatives. All of them are.
And I don't necessarily agree with many of our so-called liberal commentators either. In fact, I really don't know where I stand. Maybe that's my big problem. Maybe I use this as sort of a university of my own to learn what the devil's going on. I didn't know anything about Vietnam until I started a radio station. I didn't really know anything about politics. I was more interested in music. And the politics sort of was putting on dissent was something I just accepted. But I'm learning so much. Maybe that's the trouble. The next station that I start, I won't learn very much. It's maybe why I'll never start another one.
KRAB begins its day's broadcasting at 5:30 or 6 p.m. Signing on with a piece of esoteric music calculated to identify the station to its waiting listeners and to drive the unwary Mantovani addict onto another channel.
This is KRAB, Seattle. This evening at 6 o'clock, we have a chamber music concert. Murray, Chamber Concert in E. Cowell, Prelude for harpsichord and violin. Schumann, Quartet in A, Opus 41, number 1. Boccherini, Quintet in D for guitar and strings. Haydn, Quartet in B flat, Opus 76, number 4. So we begin this evening's broadcast with Murray, Chamber Concert in E. Murray.
Seattle may listen or not listen. From now until midnight, KRAB is on the air.
The OAS calls it a free election. The UN, all the
I don't call anything a free election.
The Socialist International calls it a free election.
I don't call it free.
Socialist International. Juan Bosch called it a free election.
I don't.
No.
Any time you have to have the army chasing up and down the streets of any country on election day and the days, 365 days a year after, I don't call that a free country.
The thing is that both he and Mr. Bosch are socialists and who pursue a socialist program of
Lawyers, despite their addiction to conflict, share in common with the rest of mankind a natural resistance to involving themselves in situations fraught with grave consequences to their pocketbooks, their reputations.
The questions are asked: name, age, place of birth, and so on. Occupation, mass murderer. Why did you leave your previous position? Hitler didn't win the war. After this, an anti-communist affidavit would be all that would be necessary, and the Immigration Service would strike a medal for the man. Existentialism and thermodynamics, of all things, arrive at rather similar formulations of the human condition. This may come as a surprise to people who don't know much about science. It's a pity that students of the humanities...
They like to say at KRAB that somehow the music and the talk and the argument do help to break down the walls of the studio. And out it goes into the night for anyone who cares to hear it. That, very simply, is the theory and practice of KRAB.